The West Virginia football team has won a game for the first time in a month. But can the Mountaineers bottle up that momentum and carry it through the season's second half? For Keenan Cummings, I'm Serre, and welcome to Musings from the Mountains. West Virginia is going to face a challenge against Iowa State this Saturday. Cyclones are coming off a win over number 8 Oklahoma State a week ago. To preview the Cyclones, we're joined by Bill Seals, publisher of CycloneReport on the Rivals Network. Bill, are the Cyclones for real?
Well, I think they're playing a whole lot better than they were earlier in the season, guys. The narrative after that 2-2 start was just kind of about, unfulfilled expectations and just a lot of frustration, I think, and out of Cyclone Nation and the national press kind of dropped them pretty quickly too. And now you've got a little bit different scenario playing out now with the 3 consecutive wins and a really good home win for Coach Campbell and his staff this past Saturday against number 8 Oklahoma State, a team that has certainly had Iowa State's number in the Campbell era there at ISU.
Now, if you could go ahead and fill us in a little bit, Coach Campbell, everybody you talked to this week, what is the thought process going on in Ames? What's everybody kind of looking at? What are they looking at headed into this weekend?
Well, I think that West Virginia certainly has Iowa State's attention from getting in there with Coach Campbell today for the media session. He brought up just that they think that the Mountaineers have a lot of skill players on both sides of the field and elite talent at every position. And certainly I think the ability for the Mountaineers to run the ball effectively is on their minds too, and how this could be a very balanced West Virginia attack, I think, offensively. And then, defensively, I think the Mountaineers were probably one of the first to move over to that 3-3-5, I think, after Iowa State had some success running it. And I think that always poses some problems. A lot of times, teams don't like to go up against something like that, but Iowa State will have to kind of beat a team at its own game, I guess, so to speak, on Saturday, going up against a front like that.
Bill, you mentioned obviously a 3-game win streak and things are looking better. What has changed? What has changed between the 2-2 start and over the last 3 weeks?
I think a lot of it has been the health of the team. They got off to really even the week before the Iowa loss, a 16-10 win over UNI, a team in the FCS, was not a very encouraging start even before the loss to Iowa, and then later the loss at Baylor. But I think that first game, Charlie Kohler didn't play, all Big 12 tight end. They didn't have him in that game, and really didn't have him at a full 100% until just here recently. So he has had to work his way back. And as you've seen out of Iowa State, I think here this season, in a lot of games, it's been Xavier Hutchinson and Charlie Kohler, the two kind of the mainstays in that passing game. And then, you factor in that Kohler wasn't completely healthy in that start, and you just saw how really limited I think Iowa State offensively was during that start. But now you're seeing I think a totally different offense, and one that can hurt defenses in a lot of different ways. Even when defenses have kind of stacked up and tried to stop Breece Hall, Iowa State still can beat you through the air. And Brock Purdy, one of the top 5 quarterbacks nationally in completion percentage, and still able to beat the 8th ranked team in the country, and certainly an Oklahoma State defense that was I think 19th in the country in total defense coming in. And they stopped Breece Hall in that game on the ground, but yet Iowa State still manages to find a way to pull out the victory.
Oh, we talked a lot about obviously the offense. Obviously, you mentioned Brock Purdy and his efficiency. Is he playing like you expected him to play as a senior? I know at times he struggled with turnovers and some other things, but obviously not against West Virginia. He seems to always play well against West Virginia. But in general, is he exactly what kind of you guys, expected him to be in his senior year?
He's taken it to an entirely different level. And really, I think, I mean, you guys are big into the PFF, your Pro Football Focus, uh, those breakdowns each week. And really, if you look at Brock Purdy over his first 3 seasons, kind of trending downward. Took the conference, the country by storm as his first year, and that all started with that win at Oklahoma State. But then, really, his sophomore year, he gets hurt, both ankles injured by the end of that season. And then, last year, I think maybe more between the ears and just maybe not trusting himself as much. But this year, just kind of letting it all hang out again. I think trying to recapture some of that form that he had as a true freshman. But really remarkable just how efficient he's playing right now. The 11-4 in touchdowns to interceptions. But coming out of that Iowa game, he threw 3 interceptions against Iowa in week 2, has thrown 1 in the game since then, and thrown for, I believe, 10 touchdowns to just 1 pick since that Iowa game. So a huge turnaround there. And, in addition to just the completion percentage has been huge. So I think he's taken it to a level that we saw, maybe flashes of his freshman year, but hasn't been seen since.
How about defensively, Bill? Iowa State's been very strong the past couple seasons. Obviously a lot of people have talked about their scheme and, a lot of people mimicking that. What is this unit good at? Where has this unit improved? I mean, nationally, they're one of the tops in the league, one of the tops in the country.
Yeah, that 3-3-5, it was kind of designed stop an air raid killer or some of those high flying teams of the Big 12. Iowa State sat out early in Matt Campbell's tenure to try to figure out a way to defend those. So, and a big part of that is when you've got those 3-man fronts. And Iowa State really hasn't blitzed a whole lot early in games. I think you've seen that a little more late. I think a lot of Cyclone fans were frustrated maybe not getting it soon enough against Oklahoma State last week. But, when you're in that base 3-man front, you don't get a whole lot of pressure and you can kind of get hurt in multiple ways there. So really it depends then on your D-backs and your linebackers being good tacklers in space. Now that at times, Anthony Johnson was one who kind of struggled in run protection and being an open field tackler against Oklahoma State. But Iowa State got some big games out of some other guys. Isheem Young will be one. I think West Virginia fans aware of him, recruited him out of high school out of Philadelphia. But he's one that is a huge factor in that 3-3-5, kind of that safety that can come up and really be a factor in the running game in those 3-man fronts and come up and support. So, but the linebackers again with Mike Rose, obviously a name synonymous with Iowa State and defense in recent years. He might be an injury concern this week, though, guys. Kind of has a shoulder that's nicked up, kind of questionable for this game, I think, right now. And that's going to test the depth of Iowa State's defense. And we've seen the second team guys get a lot of reps. So I think that at least is encouraging if you're Matt Campbell coming into this one.
Now, sticking with the defensive line is a strength for the Cyclones. Neil Brown had mentioned this earlier today. Will McDonald, obviously one of the tops in the conference. I'm not even going to try to pronounce number 58. Can you just take us kind of through what kind of personnel that is and what each guy's strengths are?
Yeah, Eni Iwazurike. Well, how about that? Is that that's how you pronounce his first
Perfect.
name?
That'll do.
I feel like
Not,
I got to clap for that one.
certainly not how it sounds. So you yeah, it's hard to guess that one. But anyway, Annie is kind of I think he's one that's popped up on Mel Kiper's uh, story that was published today is someone that is in the top 10 on defensive tackles coming out into the next year's draft. And he's really come out of nowhere. I mean, he's been steady. He's been in the mix, but this year taken his play to an entirely different level. And I think he's done that by being so multiple. He's someone that Iowa State, the nose guards this year lost their top two from a year ago. That's kind of been an issue at times, maybe early in the season, getting a high level of play out of the two noses in the middle of that 3-3-5. But any is big enough that he could move inside and play there. They had an injury with Isaiah Lee earlier in the year. Isaiah is back and playing now. And you've got also in there J.R. Singleton, another factor. But just that I think the value that Ennie has added in being able to play inside and outside, I think he'll be a 3-4 defensive end in the NFL playing next season. And then just all the attention that Will McDonald has gathered as he's one sack away from breaking the all-time sacks record at Iowa State. And with the attention that he's gathered, he was double teamed most of that game against Oklahoma State and still managed to make an impact down the stretch. And you've got, when you've got any that can line up with him, that's pretty formidable. And on the flip side, Zach Peterson is kind of that guy that does all the dirty work, maybe doesn't get a whole lot of attention, but certainly is a factor as well. So yeah, I mean, it all in that 3-3-5, you got to be strong up front, no doubt. And Iowa State, it does all start, I think, up front with those guys being successful.
That's something that WVU offensive coordinator Jared Parker had talked about today was the impact of John Haycock, defensive coordinator for Iowa State. Can you go through a little bit about, kind of how he approaches things and what he means to the overall success of that defense?
Well, if you don't have John Haycock, you don't have Matt Campbell, I think, getting with every head coaching job that comes open anymore, Matt Campbell's name's in it. If it's not for John Haycock, you don't have all that. I mean, those two have been one can't do what he's done without the other. They really have worked well together. Early in Campbell's tenure, well, and Haycock, he came with him to Iowa State, but what they were doing with kind of that kind of a 4-2-5 alignment just wasn't really working early in that first season. And I think it was maybe about the midway point that just in the course of a game week, they totally throw out the old defense and go to a 3-3-5. And I guess the rest is history. As I mentioned here a little bit ago, kind of an air raid killer, a team, teams like Oklahoma, like Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, although the OSU's had some success against it, but really designed to kind of try to keep those teams in check. In order to beat that, you've got to sustain the 10, the 11 play drives, and you've got to be meticulous about working the ball down the field. And then on also that, I mean, if you're Iowa State, you're counting on, one play, maybe on a first down, you'll get a 2 or a 3 yard stop. And I think that is where you beat opposing offenses, because you wait for them to make a mistake and then you take advantage of it.
You mentioned Matt Campbell, and I'm curious just about the culture he's built there. I mean, you look at this roster, tons of seniors, tons of guys that come back, some for their fifth or sixth year, with the super senior deal. What's that been like, and how is that progressing? Just the culture and how he's changed things there, for the Cyclones.
Yeah, it's totally been Keenan. I mean, it's been 180-degree difference kind of from what we've seen in recent coaching tenures there at Iowa State. And he puts a lot of trust into his senior classes, and really, kind of from the start of his run, he put a lot on the plates of the seniors. And it's kind of a player driven thing, but obviously didn't have a whole lot of success the first year it's always tough when you're not winning early on to kind of get that culture turn, and it takes a lot of buy-in. But they got it done in year two, and with some great seniors, and it's just kind of carried forward from there. You look at Alan Lazard, kind of being one of the firsts to kind of help with the turnaround in the culture there at Iowa State. Lazard, with Devontae Adams out for Green Bay on Thursday night, Lazard's probably going to be the number one receiver for the Packers this week. So, but Lazard was kind of one of them that got the whole thing started at Iowa State, and now ever since, whenever Matt Campbell gets an opportunity to, he thanks the senior class and talks about how big of a part it's been in the turnaround.
I guess kind of breaking down the game a little bit, Bill, and then we'll let you go here in a few minutes. What do you think are the matchups that are key here? I mean, obviously both teams need to avoid turnovers. Running the football is important. What do you think is really going to swing this game one way or the other for Iowa State?
Well, I think obviously Iowa State is at times this season. I mentioned a little bit ago, teams have really stacked up to try to stop the running game and Breece Hall. Iowa State again, I think this week will set out to try to run the ball effectively, and that feeds into the passing game and them kind of achieving the balance that they want on the offensive side of the ball. So getting Breece Hall started is going to be a big key. Also, how Iowa State handles playing against a West Virginia defense that I think in a lot of ways reminds them of what they try to do themselves. So how do you defeat that? Well, as I mentioned, you got to go 10, 11 play drives, and you've got to sustain things and play highly efficient. Iowa State's going to have to do that, and I think a lot maybe falls back on the shoulders of Brock Purdy. The tendency here in recent weeks has been that the passing yardage has been there because everyone's lining up to take Breece Hall out of the game. So Brock Purdy's going to need to have a big day. And then I think you flip over to the Iowa State defensive side, and they're gonna set out to try to stop the run and first and foremost. And one player that got a lot of Matt Campbell's attention, I think, in his press conference today was Letty Brown. He mentioned how a large portion of last year it was Breece Hall and Letty Brown that were kind of fighting it out to be the number one rushers in the Big 12. So I think certainly Letty will be a big part of what Iowa State needs to do defensively. And then, you go from there with the quarterback situation. I think Garrett and Jarrett, those two got on. Is it Dogie? Jarrett Dogie, the proper pronunciation there?
Daggy is the proper
Daggy.
pronunciation.
Okay, my mistake there. Like with not knowing how to pronounce Enio Wasarike. But anyway, I think those two quarterbacks and just the different things that they can do might pose some problems maybe for Iowa State. The mobile quarterbacks at times, I think maybe a product of that 3-3-5. Sometimes if you've got a mobile quarterback that can get and escape trouble, those are the ones that have hurt Iowa State in recent years. So a different look there is something that Iowa State definitely has to account for. And then in the the special teams side of things, one of probably the biggest factor in Iowa State's loss at Baylor earlier this season was giving up a kickoff return for touchdown, and then also a long punt return late in that game that led to a touchdown that Iowa State lost in. And Winston Wright, someone that's brought a kickoff return back for touchdown. If this is a close game on Saturday, maybe a close game in Iowa State's favor, give up something like that, and I think it could certainly swing things back to the home team.
Well, Bill, what's your prediction? How does it play out?
Well, I think that Iowa State, just kind of the way things have been trending, they're doing everything that maybe weren't early in the season, winning in the margins, as Matt Campbell likes to say. They're taking care of the football. They're starting to force some turnovers on the defensive side, and also on special teams, a much better special teams unit than early in the season too. And that's played a big role in the turnaround. Andrew Miva, someone I hadn't mentioned yet, has really come on. They had 2 punters early in the season. I guess maybe a lot like with quarterbacks. If you got 2 quarterbacks, sometimes you don't have any. Well, Iowa State had 2 punters and didn't really have any early in the season. And Andrew Mevis, who has been doing the long field goals, some of the PATs, he's now handling the punting duties and has actually shored up that unit a little bit too. So just again, in the way everything's been trending in Iowa State's direction here in recent weeks, I think this will be a team that has the ability to go on the road and win what I think will be a close game in front of certainly a hostile crowd there in Morgantown.
Now, for those of you listening, you can keep up with Bill on Twitter at William Seals. You can read all kinds of his analysis on Iowa State athletics at CycloneReport.com. Bill, as always, thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
West Virginia started off hot coming out of the bye week. A 29-17 win over TCU on Saturday. First in a month for the Mountaineers. Keenan, what was different for West Virginia coming out on Saturday?
Well, I think there was a difference in pretty much every phase of the game. The one thing that, I kind of got up on my pulpit and was preaching about last week. I mean, I was basically pulling my best Reverend impersonation was, where's the heart with this team? What does this team have for the rest of the season? Are you going to see the team that came out against Baylor, the team that played in the first half against Texas Tech, or is this bye week going to give this team some resolve? And I think we got the answer to that question. I think that answer is critical too. I'm not going to say the team was ready to give up on the season, but you had some of those concerns. And if you didn't, you weren't watching the game. I think that there were legitimate concerns about, where the coaching staff was at with this team. And not only did they respond, they responded incredibly. That game could not have started worse for West Virginia. You fall behind 7-0 on the road. Many people on Twitter, everywhere is blowing up, on the board. Here we go again. No, credit this team. They came out, they scored on consecutive possessions, took the lead back, really shut down TCU. The score's a little deceiving. I mean, honestly, had West Virginia not stalled in the red zone as much as they did, and had they been able to finish some drives, had that kick return not happen, West Virginia doesn't just win this game; they blow TCU out. They controlled the game, especially in the second half. TCU didn't even score. 229 rushing yards. Jared, 229 rushing yards. How many times have we talked about rushing the football? A whole season. That's the most rushing yards against an FBS team under Neil Brown. Second most, in his tenure. 229 rushing yards. And I think that, TCU is a bad run defense. We talked about this last week. But you had to go out there and do it. And I was very, very encouraged. And am I going to sit here and say, this is a great football team? West Virginia solved all their issues. No, I'm not. But I walked away as encouraged as I have since the Oklahoma game for a lot of reasons. Even in a loss, I felt that West Virginia was really, really on the right path. And then the Texas Tech game happened. So if they can put this in a bottle, capture it, and keep it, going down this 5-game stretch, I'm going to say what I've said all season. There's not a game on this slate West Virginia can't win. But on the other hand, there's not a game that West Virginia, can't lose.
Yeah, we spoke with Neil Brown and Jared Parker this week, and they did kind of drill home the idea that heading into TCU, they wanted to feed Letty Brown. They wanted to keep the ball on the ground, get that run game established. They really did that. And especially in a way that we haven't really seen so far this year. You look, as you mentioned, 237 rushing yards, 229 net rushing yards, 111 from Letty Brown, 69 from Garrett Green. We talk a lot about Letty Brown and Tony Mathis having a good game, but Garrett Green did break off a 67-yard run. That was huge for the Mountaineers. That was, in all, just getting that run game established and having the offensive line play the way it did in order to get that run game established was critical, absolutely critical for West Virginia to come out of the bye week and get a win in this first week. But as we've seen throughout the whole season, consistency is key with this team. If they can't come out and do it 2 weeks in a row, then it means nothing.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Jared. I think the thing when I look at this team, you talked about the offensive line play. If West Virginia can get that type of offensive line play, and once again, I know TCU struggled defensively, but if they can get any semblance of that moving forward, I mean, they pass block, they run block, they get up 1 sack. Now, some of that was what West Virginia schemed. They weren't really going to give TCU a chance off the edge, but if they can get that type of effort up front, look at Jarret Doege. I dropped the stat in our numbers and notes. He only faced pressure on 6% of his dropbacks, 6 of his 30 dropbacks, 6%. I mean, that is pretty impressive for the offensive line for a team that can get after the quarterback. For as much as they struggle in other areas, TCU does get after the quarterback. But look at Doege's numbers. I know everyone's going to point at the throw on the first drive where he tried to squeeze the ball in there, kind of a predetermined read. That was a bad throw. Everyone's going to point to, when he missed Bryce Ford Wheaton, it could have been a touchdown. That was a bad throw. He had another one that he let sail. But other than that, I mean, you look at his numbers, 21 for 27, I believe. He moved the ball efficiently. That is the Jarret Doege that I've talked about since the spring, since the summer. He even moved the pocket a few times on third down, rolled out and hit a guy, kept his eyes down the field. If he plays at that level and is protected, he's a pretty serviceable college quarterback. You can win games with him. And I think that West Virginia showed that. Now, the question is, to me, when we talk about consistency, some of that plays a little bit into the opponent as well. Iowa State's a different animal here coming up this week. We'll get into that here in a second, but they have pretty much played incredible defense all the way around all year. You'll know a little bit more about where West Virginia's at in reference to their opponent coming up this week.
And in sticking with TCU, before we go ahead and preview the Cyclones, we cannot forget about Charles Woods, a secondary group that is probably by many viewed as a liability. Obviously, you lose Tyke Smith and Drayshawn Miller at the beginning of the year. Kerry Martin enters the portal. Saturday, Nick Troy Fortune went down with an injury. He's a game time decision for this week. And Charles Woods, primarily this week, but we've seen him get an increase in reps over the past couple of weeks. But primarily this week, Charles Woods has been phenomenal for this West Virginia defense. We look at TCU week, 5 tackles, a fumble recovery, and an interception. With Jordan Leslie and everybody really spouting off about how West Virginia hasn't forced any defensive takeaways, Charles Woods said, "I got you," went out there, played his heart out. And if he can consistently do that, I don't think I have any concerns really in that secondary. Keenan, what are your thoughts on Charles Woods' play last week?
I thought he was exceptional. I mean, but not only him, the whole defense. You talked about turnovers. I wrote a story last week before the game. I mean, West Virginia ranks, high in pretty much every single defensive category that you need to rank high in, other than turnovers. They had 4 coming into the game, which is kind of crazy for as well as they've played. Only 4. They got 3 against TCU, and all of them, they weren't luck. It's not like a ball bounced off and a guy got on top of it. They forced all 3 of those turnovers. I think that speaks to the aggression that the coaches are wanting to play with. I also noticed, it was mentioned in the press conference today, but I noticed that during the game, West Virginia was taking more chances with their DBs, playing tighter coverage, and that lends itself really making some of those plays. I mean, not just Charles Woods, Daryl Porter's interception. He read that. It looked like it was thrown to him. He read that route completely, got the ball. Although I still don't understand why he went out of bounds. They're trying to cut it up, but that's a story for another day. But overall, just a strong defensive effort. West Virginia's defensive line has controlled games. And if you get this secondary on the same page to where they're able to start to gel, you don't see as much fuss, as much miscommunication. We're talking 2020 defense again. And I've been saying that all year. I mean, I felt this unit had a chance to be a very good defense. They are on paper, but they're going to be tested, coming up. But to your original point, I don't know if West Virginia wins that game without Charles Woods. I mean, his interception was massive. He jumped on the fumble too. Great play by Sean Mahone there, but I mean, kind of a tone for the only real coverage bust that we saw the whole game on that fourth down. But I think that if West Virginia can get that type of effort defensively, not only playing sound football, which has really been the case for the most part, outside maybe this at times against Maryland, and then the Baylor game, which I think the Baylor game is just going to be that one off where just nothing went right. Usually most teams have one of those games. The good teams find a way to win them, though. That's the difference. But moving forward, I think that West Virginia's got something on defense. Can you get the offense to play consistently? Can you get the DBs to play up to par? We'll see. That remains to be seen, but it's not going to get any easier this week with a very experienced and senior-laden Iowa State team coming to town.
Yeah, lots of questions surrounding this Mountaineer football team. And here's another one. How will they fare this weekend against Iowa State? You're looking at a powerhouse in the Big 12 consistently over the last couple of years. If I recall correctly, I may be wrong on this, but if I recall correctly, they were in the Big 12 title game last season.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, 5-2 on the season. Iowa State Cyclones are a team to beat. Going to be in the running for a Big 12 title berth again. Let's see. Looking at this schedule here, just coming off a homecoming win against number 8 Oklahoma State. Their only losses were against Baylor and a ranked Iowa team. There's a lot to unpack here, a lot to unpack about this Iowa State team. Nothing, arguably the most important thing when you look at this team up and down the roster is the veteran leadership that they have. You've got Breece Hall, Brock Purdy, Charlie Kolar at tight end. You've got an experienced offensive line. You've got NFL talent on the defensive line. Keenan, when you look at this, let me take a step back. You've been covering a lot of WVU Iowa State games in your day. Is Brock Purdy going to come out and throw for 400 yards this week? What do you look for? What are you expecting from this Iowa State team?
No, I don't think that's really their game. Although he does seem to have, if you go back and look, there's no player that I can think of in recent memory that, and I'm not taking nothing away from Brock Purdy. He's a great college quarterback, but his play against West Virginia compared to his play against everybody else, especially of late, is just insane. He plays some of his best football against West Virginia. I don't know if it's a scheme, just the day, or maybe he wakes up putting on the right pair of socks. I don't know, but he plays sensational against West Virginia. So could he throw 400 given the track record? Sure, but that's not really how they want to play. They want to run the football. They use a lot of, motion and things to create extra gaps. That's kind of what they do. They will throw to the tight end, which is done. If you're listening to this, has been West Virginia's enemy over the years, not being able to defend the seams, and they really exposed West Virginia with that last year. But Brock Purdy kind of keeps this thing alive. He is very efficient. I think he's second or third nationally in completion percentage. Makes a lot of safe throws. When he does throw it, he puts it where his receivers can get it. But really, Breece Hall is going to be the engine to this offense. They want to get him going. Averages over 100 yards per game. He's one of the best running backs in the country, not just the Big 12. Reminds me, it's kind of crazy. They had David Montgomery, and you think, well, hey, they ain't going to get anybody better than that. And then Breece Hall, I would argue, is better than David Montgomery was. You talked about the experience on this team. I feel like this is almost top to bottom the same team West Virginia played in 2018. Not really, but, just so many of the same names. A few changes, but a lot of the same players that are still there. And people talk about, a program like Iowa State a lot. It's something that's talked about in the blue lot. How are they having success? You want to know how they're having success? you grow up over time. These are a lot of the same players that have been there for 3, 4, sometimes 5 years, and now they're at their peak. This was supposed to be Iowa State's season that they challenged for a Big 12 title. They got in the game last year. No one really thought they would win it. They didn't. I mean, they did play close to their defense. This was supposed to be the year that they're supposed to be good. Started off with some hiccups. They can never seemingly beat Iowa for whatever reason. They really struggle in that game. But they had some hiccups earlier in the year, played inconsistent football. But of late, this is a team that's playing its best. And, of course, it is. That's West Virginia's tradition, run into Iowa State, Campbell, when they start playing their best football. So we'll see. I think it starts really offensively for them. West Virginia's got to find a way to stop the run. Defensively is a whole nother animal. We'll get into it, but that's a tough unit. They're just as good, if not better, than West Virginia's.
Now, Keenan, you mentioned Breece Hall. We have to spend some time on him because he is, at least he opened the season as a Heisman contender. I'm not into all that Vegas stuff. I don't know where he is in regard to that. But you mentioned top running back in the Big 12. I don't think there is anybody who would disagree with you on that. Taking what you saw from this West Virginia defense against TCU, do you think that this defense is capable of eliminating Breece Hall from the equation this week?
I don't think you can eliminate him, but I think you've got to slow him down. That's got to be, Jordan Leslie said it today. It's no secret. I'm not passing out state secrets. You got to find a way to slow him down. That's going to be the challenge for this defense. If they're able to run the football like they did last year, then it just opens up so much more. You got all those options with the tight ends you can throw. You can throw it down the field. Play action sets up. So there's a lot they can do if they get Breece Hall going. That's going to be the challenge. The good news is West Virginia stopped the run pretty much against everybody they played, with the exception of Baylor and a few times against Maryland. But I think some of that was more what Maryland was doing with some of their tempo. I think that caught West Virginia off guard. So I'll be interested to see really who wins up front, because West Virginia's got to win that battle. If Breece Hall runs for 150 yards, it's going to be a long day for West Virginia. I just don't see how, if they're able to get into a rhythm, because for the most part, Purdy takes care of the football pretty well. He's had issues with interceptions the past couple of years, but like I said, he's one of the top nationally right now in completion percentage, makes a lot of safe throws. I would expect if West Virginia is able to stop the run, they're going to get Hall involved in the passing game. He's caught quite a few balls this year. So they use him in a lot of different ways, and you got to get a guy like that to football no matter how you do it. So that's the matchup to me. Without going forward, the matchup to me, at least offensive defense, is how does West Virginia stop the running game? And then secondly, can you prevent some of those big plays that Iowa State's been able to hit in the passing game? Seems like when West Virginia has gotten gutted by them in the passing game, it's always been a deep ball, especially off play action.
Now, something, if we flip this around a little bit, we have West Virginia offense versus Iowa State defense. Something that stands out to me is Cyclones defensive lineman Will McDonald leads the Big 12 in tackles for loss with 9 for a total of 55 yards. That's big, especially when you consider all the struggles that West Virginia has had up front throughout the season. We did see a much improved unit played, the starting 5 played every snap against TCU. When we spoke to Neil Brown this week, he highlighted the play of those interior guys, James Gamitter, Zach Frazier, and Doug Nestor. But, Brandon Yates, inconsistent at left tackle. Wyatt Milam has played better, but I think we're still kind of going to see him and Parker Moore trade snaps at right tackle. I'm very interested to see how they contest with guys like Will McDonald, with guys like linebacker Mike Rose, who's been there for a while. This Iowa State defense has maybe not the sexiest names, but they have a lot of weapons on this defense. Keenan, what's your evaluation?
Oh, yeah, they do. This is a very, very good defense. I think they're like top 15 in scoring points per game. I think it's like 17, 18 points per game. I think they've held every opponent they've played this year to under 350 yards of total offense. And where it starts for me, and where it starts every week, like I said, this is evergreen. West Virginia run off these guys. They're only giving up, I think, 2.9 yards per carry on the season. Only have 2 rushes over 20 yards that they've allowed. Can West Virginia run the football? That was the key to getting things going last week. You're able to run the football, take some pressure off Daggy, let him manage the offense, stay ahead of schedule. Can they do that? I mean, this Iowa State team has had West Virginia's number in a lot of ways. I mean, even go back to 2018. I mentioned that already. Look how bad they made Will Greer and the company look. They made them look very, very bad. Yes, Greer played poorly, but Iowa State had something to do with that. And I think that since then they've really figured out a way to slow West Virginia down. Now, some of that, the last 2 years, there's been some wonky stuff. Austin Kendall got hurt in 2019. Last year, West Virginia didn't get off the bus. So we'll see. But the one thing you have to avoid when you play this team is getting behind the sticks, because the way they play, basically they show you a light box, but it's never a light box. When you hand the ball off, there's 4 guys when it looks like 1 or 2. Everybody's watching the ball. The way they do things is pretty much they try to trick you, try to get you to believe it's a light box, get you to run the football. They stop the run, get you to third down, let their pass rushers get after you. They always seem to have a great nose guard every single year. That's no different this year. Edge rusher, you mentioned McDonald, and their safety, their secondary play, especially with their safeties. Some of those guys have been there, it seems like, for 14 years. I feel like people used to feel about West Virginia with Pat White. That guy's here for his 43rd year of eligibility. But some of those guys have been there forever. They're experienced group. They understand what they're doing. I think this is the best defense West Virginia has played this year by far. I really don't think it's even close.
Now, Keenan, looking at West Virginia, 1 or 2 things, what has to happen for the Mountaineers to come out of this one with a win?
Well, they got to score more points. That works, right? I mean, no, seriously.
Dynamite analysis, Keenan.
Yeah, I mean, I get paid for this too. Remember that. I think they've got to be able to run the football, as I said. They got to be able to sustain drives. Make Jarrett Dagey comfortable. Don't get him out of his element. The last thing you want is him running around and trying to make a play with his feet, when it's not there. I have shades of Virginia Tech all over again, in some of those other situations this season. I think they got to use Garrett Green some too to help generate something in the run game. I think that's important. You've got to be able to score when you get in the red zone. You can't keep kicking field goals. West Virginia hasn't hit the 30-point mark against an FBS team all year. I'm not sure this shapes up to me as more of a defensive slugfest. I could see a lower score in the 20s, but if you have a chance to get 30, you got to take it. You can't keep kicking field goals. That's going to cost you more than it doesn't. It has cost West Virginia this year already. And looking at some of the other things too, I think that West Virginia's got to continue to be good on third down. That's something they did a good job against TCU on both sides of the ball. And whenever Iowa State does get in the red zone, same thing as last week. They've scored 21 touchdowns of their 28 scores. Once they get inside the 20, hold them to field goals. That's what wins you football games. And of course, it goes without saying, you don't even have to mention this, but whoever wins the turnover margin usually wins a college football game.
That has been huge, especially looking at this Mountaineer team. Also, time of possession has been huge. It's how they almost beat Oklahoma. It's how they beat TCU. I totally think that is the course of action Neil Brown and company are going to try and take this week. But who knows? We can sit here and talk all this time. They still got to go out and play the game. So I guess let's just get into it. Keenan, last week, I was optimistic. First time in a while, West Virginia pulled it out. You, not so optimistic. I'm not going to sit here and make you eat crow in front of all our listeners, but take me through what you're feeling this week. What are you thinking? How does it play out?
To be fair, I did say I think West Virginia can win this game, but I can't pick them. And I couldn't. I could not pick West Virginia last week until I saw tangible evidence and not just a bunch of talking that this team was going to put together a complete effort. I have a weird feeling about this game, and I don't know why. I can't shake it. I thought about putting it in the 3-2-1 this year, but they've burned me too much already. I've already missed 3 predictions in that thing with this team, and I'm not falling for it again. But I do think that for some strange reason, I think West Virginia is going to find a way to win this football game. I've gone back and forth on it. I think I actually wrote yesterday when I was talking to our Iowa State site that I think Iowa State will probably pull out a close one, but just being at home, the crowd's going to be energized. You could tell. I mean, even you could tell today, Jared, right, that there just seems to be a different air about this football team.
Agreed.
Right now, they seem to have more confidence than they've had in a long time. And Iowa State, while a very good football team, I've sat here and talked about them for 15 minutes now, I don't think is unbeatable. Baylor beat them. Oklahoma State had a chance to beat them last week. And maybe they would have had not for a bad spot. West Virginia owes this team. And while that doesn't matter from year to year in the grand scheme of things, I think that this is going to be a game that West Virginia puts things together and wins a close one at home. They've lost a lot of games in close fashion this year. I think they find a way to win this one. I'm going to go 27-24.
Not so fast, Keenan, in the words of the immortal Lee Corso. I think, I'm riding the wave that you're on regarding, this definitely seems like a game where West Virginia is going to come out and play incredibly well because, that's how it shakes out. They play good against the good teams. They play horrible against the bad teams. It's the law of averages somehow, some way. I think they're going to roll with the time of possession angle, but I see this shaken out similarly to how the Oklahoma game played out. I'll just say I think Iowa State wins this one, but I think West Virginia's in it. I'm going to roll with a 24-20 prediction. I think West Virginia, has the lead headed into the fourth quarter going down the stretch. Late Iowa State touchdown puts them ahead, and ultimately they win. But I really don't have a reason to go against WVU other than the fact that they haven't really been consistent. But if they have been consistent, this team, if they can play like they did against TCU, this team could take on a lot of people. And like you said, they could win. Theoretically, they could probably win out. But who knows? That's why they play the games.
I think that you're right there. I mean, that's the thing. Who knows? I'm taking West Virginia here, dude. But, I mean, would anybody be shocked if Iowa State won? I think the thing that we need to see, that fans need to see, that everybody needs to see is, can West Virginia build off what happened in Fort Worth? What happened in Fort Worth doesn't matter if they come out and just flat and play awful against Iowa State. And I think that's the key. I mean, we're both thinking we're on the same wavelength there. We think that it is going to carry over, but we'll see. If West Virginia is able to go in and win this football game, you're setting at 4-4 with 4 games left. Who would have bought stock in that last week before kickoff? Who would have? I mean, be honest.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. God, this year has been so interesting. I've only been focused on WVU sports since I came to college here in the fall of 2018. But God, is this team, this program is so interesting to watch. Every roller coaster of a season. God, I wish I was there for the Skylar Howard years. This weekend, West Virginia, Iowa State, 2 p.m. kickoff. You can find it on ESPN Plus. Don't forget to join the conversation before, during, and after the game on the Blue Lot at WVSports.com. Keenan and I will have coverage immediately after the game, as well as the days following and during the game. Our game threads, top notch, can't beat them. They're a cesspool, but they're a lovable cesspool, so you can't forget about those. As always, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. That's the only way you can make sure you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening to Musings from the Mountains, and we'll talk to you soon.